Welcome to the show, talking NASCAR news, season in review. Chris Graham and Rod Mullins, and I said this, Rod, on our last couple of podcasts. In some ways, can't believe that the season's over. It just seems like yesterday we were talking about the race in California as they were getting ready to head to Daytona, and getting everybody flared up and ready to go. And here we have a champion now. We've gone through a season. We've had ups and downs. Chase Elliott, one of the downs. We've had guys retiring, guys moving truck or excuse me, just teams, everything else. Where do we
Right.
start with the season in review?
I guess more than anything else, we probably start with, to me, I think, is the big fall. And I say that honestly. You mentioned about Chase Elliott. I think that was probably the biggest surprise. It opened up a can of worms as far as I'm concerned. It opened up a can of worms in regard to the fact that should NASCAR drivers do things in their off time away from the track that could very well jeopardize their season. And I'm sure as Chase Elliott looks back on this right now, he's probably thinking to himself, why did I go snowboarding? And even though I had the opportunity to go do it, why did I do it? Because, you know, you have to be, hate to say it in this kind of way, you have to kind of expect the unexpected at times. Be prepared for things. You have to be prepared. And that goes back to that old Boy Scout motto tip, over and over. You need to be prepared for things. Expect the unexpected when you're out on the track. Expect the unexpected when you're out on the highway. I mean, these are all things that I believe Chase Elliott has learned from. And it was probably his best chance, I think, this year to compete for a championship, but it just didn't happen. I mean, even though that Hendrick ended up, I think the Chevrolet won the manufacturer's award and so forth out of it. It still is a sore spot, I think, for that team, for Hendrick, and especially for Chase Elliott this past year. It just hurt. It hurt a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, a guy that's always in the mix, not even in the playoffs this year. Bubba Wallace makes the playoffs. How important was that for his career? I mean, I think going into this season, this was a make or break season for him. I mean, obviously he didn't win the championship, but he made the playoffs, advanced around. I think he kind of needed to do that to kind of maintain his spot. Maybe he's not a top tier driver, but he's at least in the top tier conversation. He had to do what he did to be able to kind of stay in that mix.
Yeah, I agree. It was one of those seasons where I think there was a lot riding on the line for him. And I think there were a lot of people, even his sharpest critics, were saying, Bubba Wallace is supposed to be this great driver that we've seen on short tracks and so forth, and his rise up from, truck series and so forth, and coming into Xfinity and racing late model series and different things. But he hadn't quite gotten over that bubble. He hadn't quite gotten off of that bubble, so to speak. It was almost like he was in a safe zone. And then it was, here you are, you're faced with making the playoffs, and you either get better or you get worse as the season goes on. And that team improved. I think that team improved a lot. I think they learned a lot more about each other more so than it was Bubba learning about the crew. I think they both learned about each other a whole lot. But when you've got Michael Jordan signing your checks, and I bring this up again, Michael Jordan is going to put some pressure on you. It definitely didn't work with the Bobcats / Hornets and everything when he had that team. But I think it mattered especially to Bubba Wallace, and whether it be because of color, I don't know what, but I think it put some pressure on him that, hey, it's time for me to show something and, fight against, whatever has been the thought before that we can't drive. Now, the next step is, okay, now that we've got an African American who has made the playoffs in NASCAR, let's see what we can do about getting a female in a car and making the playoffs. That's going to be the next step. I think NASCAR is going to have to look at and see who is viable getting into that kind of position. But for for Bubba Wallace, yeah, it was make or break this year. And I think there were a lot of eyes on him focusing on the negative more so than what he was capable of accomplishing. Does he still rub the media raw the wrong way? Yes, he does. He still rubs other competitors the wrong way. But he goes out, he is, at least I have to say this, he's been consistent, and that's what got him into the playoffs this year.
So outside of Chase Elliott, who his not making the playoffs was self-inflicted. You talked about the snowboarding, he missed several races. That's the main reason he missed the playoffs. So outside of a guy missing a bunch of races to miss the playoffs, who do you think was the biggest disappointment this year? Who had a lot more expected, maybe made the playoffs, just didn't advance very far, maybe didn't make the playoffs. However you want to quantify that, who do you think would qualify as the biggest disappointment?
I'll give you one, and it kind of stands out with me as Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch set the woods on fire coming out of the gate. Won his first race. What, 3 or 4 races into the season or something, pulled off a race win. Things looked good there for a while with Richard Childress Racing. And then we saw what appeared to be, I don't know if it was as much Kyle Busch as much as it was the team, whatever. We didn't get this thing in the media that Kyle Busch was at odds with his crew chief or he was at odds with his crew whatsoever. I think they were all on the same page. I think what we got was the fact of, well, the newness is kind of worn off. So now let's just see what we can do the rest of the way. And I think they did enough that got them into the playoffs there in that first round of the 16. But then after that, they just kind of faded pretty quickly after that. This year coming up for 2024 is going to be a make or break year for Kyle Busch. I think he has to go out and he has to definitely set the track on fire with what he's capable of doing. And I think we're going to see an obvious step up by Richard Childress Racing to try to put him back to that pedestal once. And I hate to say this, folks, once held by Dale Earnhardt. They're going to try to put him to that pedestal again. They're going to try to put him up there to that pedestal because I think Kyle Busch is a very, very good race car driver. No doubt about it. It's just the fact of what he's had the past couple of years. This year, it was daylight compared to dark last year when he was running for Joe Gibbs Racing and did not have a good season altogether. So I think it's a make or break year for him, but that was the disappointment for me this year was Kyle Busch. Really just setting it on fire at first and then just kind of fading off like an ember floating up into the sky. It just kind of burned out after a while and he kind of floated back down to earth after that. So it just didn't materialize the way you'd hoped.
On the flip side, biggest positive surprise in 2023.
That's a good one right there.
That's hard. There's a lot of guys you can go to there.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys with that. I really have to say that Christopher Bell was another positive thing for the sport this past season. He hung right in there, was in the playoffs last year, made it again to, the Phoenix race again in that Final Four, and then everything came apart for him. I mean, everything came apart for him in that race. The biggest surprise, I think, probably another one of those, William Byron, as many races as he won all season. And yet he was there toward the end, made it, just didn't quite get it over the finish line to where they wanted that championship or they got that championship. But I have to go back and I have to really look at it that probably Ryan Blaney was one of my biggest surprises this year. Did I expect him to win a championship? No. Early on in the season, I kind of expected a kind of a so-so performance from Penske Racing this year, especially with Ryan Blaney. I would have expected it from Joey Logano. There's one that we could throw into the disappointment thing. I could throw that in there too and just say Joey Logano was a big disappointment this past year for Penske Racing, not making the playoffs. And, getting back to the same thing, the biggest surprise, I'd have to include Denny Hamlin in there. I'd include Denny Hamlin on big surprise and biggest disappointment because there he showed up and we thought, well, gosh, we were talking in October. He may be going to win the championship. It seems like they've got all their ducks in a row and they're ready to go. And then everything fell apart for him. And then that one race that I think he pulled the DNF before the season going in, before they even got to Martinsville, somewhere in there, before they got to Martinsville, he ended up pulling a DNF. That didn't help him any. That was one of those that cost him down the line, and he admits it now. He admits it, that they just kind of lost focus of the prize where they were hoping to go to. So I kind of give a plus and a negative to Denny Hamlin on that.
One other surprise, he only raced very limited this year, but he did win a race. And now looking for a full-time ride in the next couple of years. Shane Van Gissenbergen came out of nowhere, won in Chicago on the streets of Chicago, the mean streets.
Yep.
Some of the other drivers said, "Man, he made that look easy."
Yeah,
To
he
a point
did.
where they were embarrassed that he won. So he's looking for a ride. What's the latest on him? And where he came, his Cinderella story coming out of nowhere.
Well, where he came out of Australia, it wasn't really much of a disappointment per se. Marcus Ambrose was really good when he came over from Australia. He ran in the Supercar Series, came to Richard Petty. I think he only managed to pull one win off while he was racing for Richard Petty. But, he's going to be competing. He's aiming to compete in 2025. I know there were a lot of people hoping he would probably compete in the 2024 season, but he told Speed Cafe, it's a website, magazine. He told him, it sounds like I'm going to be doing a lot of races for 2024 and then also leading into 2025. When they said that that's going to be a part-time schedule, though, maybe 20 races, it's more than what they do in Australia full time. So, but he wants to get as much experience as possible. He wants to be in the Cup Series in America in 2025. He would confirm that his commitment referred to full-time Cup competition. I know that Trackhouse is trying to get him right now to kind of do a series of truck races, Xfinity races, maybe even some ARCA races to try to get him some experience along the line to help him out for 2025. So right now, he'll probably likely make the move to the United States in mid-December, which will be around 2 to 3 weeks after the Supercar season finale over in Australia. That'll be the Valeo Adelaide 500 is what he's going to be competing in over there. And for folks that don't know what the Supercar series is, very similar to NASCAR. They just run different nameplates, although some of them are GM, some of them are Ford, but they run the Supercar series, very similar to NASCAR over in Australia.
And the reason that he would need to build up to 2025, and I can see this, a very smart move on his part. If he's not used to racing that grueling NASCAR schedule, it's not about. He's won a NASCAR race, so I mean, he can compete at the top level in any given weekend, either a Saturday or a Sunday. But it's the grind of the NASCAR schedule that he would not be used to, and he's going to have to build up. He's kind of like, I'm thinking about the equivalent of a minor league baseball player working their way up to the major leagues. It's as much about being able to do it from February to November as it is just winning one race. So that's a pretty smart and it's got to be tough, because I'm sure there are offers out there and he can make a lot of money next year. But if you want to do it right, take your time and get there when you're ready.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's what he needs to do. Like you said, it takes a special breed to do a 36 race schedule, plus do some testing in between of what they do have of testing, and then all these other requirements. He's going to be kind of starting from ground level on promoting himself. There's going to be, race fans that know who he is and everything because he won Chicago, but he's going to have to build up an audience is what he's going to have to do. And yeah, it's going to take him some time and everything. Hey, I kind of compare it to this thing of the situation right now with Josh Dobbs, who has gone to Minnesota. I mean, look at how many teams he's been with.
Yeah.
I knew he was a great quarterback when he came out of the NCAA and out of Tennessee, even though it was under Butch Jones. He was a really good quarterback. He didn't get his chance in Pittsburgh because he had to play second fiddle to Ben Roethlisberger, and so that's one. Then they end up, he goes back. I think he ends up going with Pittsburgh again, I think at one time. Then here in the latest, He went to Arizona, didn't make it at Arizona too well for what they were looking for, then shows up in Minnesota, and now they're 2-0 under his, you know, leadership as quarterback. So I think that's one of the things you're going to have to take some lumps. And yeah, I think they're expecting that for him to take some lumps either on the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, the ARCA. They're taking that in consideration. They know the talent's going to be there. It's just a matter of getting him ready to be able to display that talent, what he's capable of on a full-time basis.
Josh Dobbs equivalent to Shane Van Gisbergen in one sense. Van Gisbergen won his race in Chicago, first race in NASCAR.
Right.
Josh Dobbs won his first start with Minnesota. He hadn't even run a snap in practice with the Vikings that
No.
week because they were trying to prepare another backup quarterback to be the starter. And he didn't even know all of his teammates' names, and he won a game. So
Yeah, and I think it was even wild too that he came to the their facility up there, the stadium and everything. He came for the game that day, and the people, the ushers and the security people, they gave him a rough time. They were like, "Who? Who are
yeah,
you? Who are you? Why are you supposed to be here?" And
yeah.
finally, they got past that, and now they know who he is. So I don't know if we've jinxed him for week 3 or his week 3 in the NFL this time around with the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know. We'll have to see. But got a bunch of them up there talking about playoffs before it's over with. Some possibility of, hey, he may lead us to the playoffs. But that's, I don't know. It's a little bit early on to be able to call that one right now, I think.
If we've got the power of the jinx, we need to wield it wisely. Let's see. I'll start talking good about Alabama football, Duke basketball. Oh boy, I can have some fun with that. So let's have that power of the jinx. I want to.
Well, in one way, when we started saying that we wouldn't talk about Denny Hamlin is when we jinxed him, and he started doing not so good after that. So there may be a
It was a reverse
possibility.
jinx there. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Fittingly, we'll finish this podcast. A couple of items about Kevin Harvick. I say fittingly we'll finish with because he finished his full-time career in NASCAR this year, a 7th-place finish in Phoenix in the last race. But there is some hint that he may, because I couched what I said there very carefully. Full-time career. He may want to race a little bit more, just not full-time.
Right. And I think what he's doing is he's kind of getting the feel of whether or not he's going to do something maybe with a race team or whatever he wants to do or his own race team. But, they asked him during the last full-time competition weekend at Phoenix, what he was going to be doing, what he was going to do besides going into the booth for Fox and working for them next year in the spring series of races. Harvick said, "I'm not sure yet. The door's open." He said, "I'm not going to drive Cup ever again. I can't be competitive. I can't make myself go there and say, I'm looking for a top 30. So, and I understand that. I understand that right now where he's coming from. You'd be lucky to run 30th, I think, the way that things are and the way things are changing. But when it came to the Truck Series and it came to the Xfinity Series, he's a part co-owner in a series, the Cars Tour, that I think he and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and I think another driver kind of went in on all together. And so they co-own the Cars Tour. And, he believes that when it comes time to scratch that itch, if he's got the itch to get back into a race car, he can either do it maybe in the Car Series, sort of like what Dale Earnhardt Jr. is doing off and on at select races, or, maybe he thinks the Xfinity stuff is probably a little bit more interesting. He's worried more, I think, right now about doing a great job for Fox. And I think he will do a great job for Fox. I think it's going to bring a little more energy and a little more, how can I say this, a little more in-depth kind of coverage. At least we get it from Clint Boyer on one hand, but now that you got Kevin Harvick in there, you're going to get Mr. Excitement sort of himself. Kevin Harvick can get really excited about talking about a race car, but at the same time, he can really let you know the ins and outs about that race car and how that race car is running, even from being up there in the booth. So I think he's going to try to do the best job he can. Once he gets settled in, by the time he gets to June, he said that maybe we can fit this in. Looks like a good weekend. Maybe we can do it. But he said, I think I could race the super late model series during the week because they have a lot of Tuesday night races and Thursday night races. but I need to drive it first to find out what he's going to do. So he's still got some driver in him. The driving piece is still there for him, but he's not exactly sure where it's going to come to being yet. I look for him, like he said, that late model series at least during the week, and then possibly after June, opening up maybe a race or two, maybe a month or two, see how he's going to do on the Xfinity series and just enjoy himself, have some fun. I think that's what Dale Jr. is trying to do right now. And I think he's trying to get back a little bit of that competitiveness that he kind of had to take, kind of a back seat to after he was ruled with that concussion and so forth, that they thought he'd never race again, or they thought he would not be racing. We saw Dale Jr. and we saw what Dale Jr. was capable of even this past season when he was running at Bristol. A lot of great things. And I think Kevin Harvick could do the same thing too.
You know what else I think Kevin Harvick can bring to the booth? I think he can bring a little shake and bake.
Oh
Perhaps with
yeah.
Clint Boyer. Yeah, the last item we'll talk about, you phrased it when we were talking about what we put on the show. It's either art imitates life or life imitates art. This, folks, is a true story. He is buying.
This is not made up.
It's just not made up. Just tell people what Kevin Harvick is buying.
He's buying the 6.5 or something like that, $6.7 million mansion that was featured in Talladega Nights, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby. And we saw the house. Everybody, kind of thought that, hey, it was all staged, the house and everything. But no, this was an actual house that they did some of the filming in, the outside shots and so forth. And yeah, he bought it. I was like, wow, he bought this house. What's he going to use it for? Well, of course he's going to use it to live in, but it kind of caught me off guard when he did that. I was just in shock that he was going to go and he was going to buy such a thing. And, as you can tell right now, the dogs are real happy about that too, because they're going off back here in the background a little bit, thanking Kevin Harvick for probably buying this house and making it famous. Again, there's just one other thing I wanted to add about it. It's a 12,000 square foot home that has 6 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms. Wow. An infinity pool, boat dock, and 4-car garage, among other features. 6.75 million. And it's in a gated community on Lake Norman. And if you're ever heading down there on the interstate at Lake Norman, there around Cornelius, North Carolina, you kind of come edge to edge, the road with the lake right there. And you see a lot of nice houses right there on Lake Norman. And that's where a lot of the drivers, they have their homes down there. And I'm telling you, he got a good one is what he did. He got a good house out of this, even though, like I said, the mansion is real. He's doing it all. He's enjoying it. He's going all the way to the bank with this one on 6.75 million.
As long as he doesn't run around on the track at some of those late model races on Tuesdays in his tighty whities, we'll know everything's okay, right?
Yeah, we don't need to see him like that. One other note I want to point out too, that asking even listeners and stuff, if you are familiar about the name Ken Squire, you know him to be the voice for a long time on CBS of the Daytona 500. He was the one that made the famous call when Bobby Allison, Donnie Allison, Cale Yarborough, they all got into it there in the turn, and ended up the race being won on that snowy weekend. Well, sources are saying now that he had not shown up, or he was not available for a particular, I think it was a New England Sports Hall of Fame sort of thing that they were having about racing. But he is now, Ken Squire has entered into hospice care following numerous health challenges over the past few years. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's had a stroke and then also some other issues. According to his daughter, Ashley Jane Squire, an update on our passionate and vibrant father, Ken Squire. Dad is now in hospice care, resting peacefully and surrounded by the love of friends, family, and his dog. They are hoping to move him. This was of today, the 15th, hoping to move him from the hospital to his home nestled in the mountains of central Vermont. After such big and bold adventures, it seems inconceivable that one tiny intestinal blockage could fell him like it has. But we've kind of been on that end ourselves here. Our family has. but the family is deeply grateful for so many of you who are praying for peace for Dad and comfort for us. And I'm going to admit it. I'm going to miss the man when the man does pass away. I'm going to miss him. I know some of the legends that were up there that day for the New England Racing Museum. It was supposed to be this past Sunday. Ken Squire, Mike Joy, Dick Berggren, that was just to name a few. Jack Arute was another one, and MC Alan Bestwick. And I'm familiar with Alan Bestwick from my time in radio when I worked the local radio scene. And I had to talk to Alan Bestwick on a semi-regular basis, either for ABC radio networks or MRN when he was working there. And so, they had a big lineup for that, but definitely missing from the lineup was none other than Ken Squire. So we hope everything goes all right with Ken Squire, and also thoughts with the family on this, because it's going to be a big loss when he does pass away. I know people haven't heard him for a long time, maybe on the air, but he just had that voice. He had that voice for racing, no doubt about it.
Yeah, he was the voice of racing for a generation there, no doubt about that too.
Yep.
Well, good way to end that the show. And boy, this wraps the 2023 NASCAR season. Hard to believe. Just a couple months away from starting to right back up. So it's just the way the world turns. We'll get people caught up on the comings and goings and get them ready for Los Angeles and then Daytona and whatever else is coming up. It'll be a lot of fun. But Rod, this has been another fun season for us to do this podcast. I want to thank you as always for sharing your time and your insight each week to help us figure things out.
I appreciate it, Chris, and I appreciate the people that download and listen to the podcast and everything and follow the podcast. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We've got some good numbers out there. And, more than anything else, we just try to give it to you from a different perspective. I think you see it on Fox and you see it on some of these other different kinds of podcasts. I'm just going to tell you, I listened to a couple of podcasts one night for racing, and oh, wow. I'm not meaning to brag or anything, but you hosting more than anything else, it was head and shoulders above what I listened to one night. It sounded like somebody going and using just an old tape recorder just to record everything with. I know that we try to do the best we can with it. And I think for a lot of people, I think we're happy that those people listen and so forth and follow the podcast. And we hope you'll continue to do so for the future next year. That is, if you're all going to have me around by next year. So we'll just see.
Well, kind words there from Rod for our listeners out there. Any questions, anything to share with us, anything you want us to look into for future podcasts, please email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.